Hi, everyone. Welcome to the National Parents Union Nightly Restorative Check-In. It is January 22nd. I have to look at the date all the time because time just keeps rolling. For those of you that don't know me, I am Dr. Enjolie and I am here on Otham land in this beautiful Sonoran Desert in Arizona. The Nightly Restorative Check-In is the brainchild of Marisol Quevedo, who hosts the show on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then here I come in and host on Fridays. At least the way that I conceive of her check-in, or at least what the check-in is for me, I think about what I want to be doing on Friday. That I want to chill, I want good food, I want to be with people that I care about. And it's that time where we get to just really check in, right? And have somebody ask us how it is that we're really doing. And we can give kind of that full explanation without having to chop it up because we have to work or do something the next day. I know that many of us work on Saturdays anyway. I'm going to work tomorrow, but at minimum, right, for the most part, like there's this idea that Friday is that time to kind of wind down. Right, it's that relaxing and connecting, right, with the people that we care about. NPU is actually about a year old. We've had our anniversary now, but the broadcast started in March, and I was actually one of Marisol's initial guests. And on the first time I came on, I introduced a breath pattern titled 478, which is not my breath pattern. It is a very ancient breath pattern, but it is one that I learned. And so we start every show that way. So we're going to maintain the integrity of the show across Marisol's shows and my shows. So the way 478 works is you're inhaling for 4 seconds, holding your breath for 7 seconds. See, I'm like getting ready. And exhaling for 8 seconds. And then we do that 4 times around. I'll count it out for you. This breath pattern actually has quite a bit of research behind it. And we know that it helps with sleep. If you're suffering with some insomnia and you wake up in the middle of the night, it's a good breath pattern to get you back to sleep. It's also really helpful if you're anxious. I use this breath pattern as a way to transition from kind of like one meeting to the next. In the days when we could walk to meetings, I would use it on my way as I was walking from one meeting to the next. All right. So just some other kind of tips. I encourage you all to close your eyes or to pick a focal point just so that you're not visually distracted. And if at any point you get lost, because if it's your first time doing this breath pattern, it can feel a little off. It's not a natural way of breathing, especially on the exhalation. On the exhalation, after that 7 count of holding, you kind of almost want to like release your breath, but while you're still holding it at the same time, which can feel weird. So you want to slowly release instead of totally dumping out your breath. I trust you guys will figure it out. And if you don't, you're going to try it again the next time, and then it's going to make more sense. Okay, so you get lost, just bring yourself back to the count and listen for my 4 count. All right. You guys know I always have to settle myself down to like lead you in this pattern because I have all this energy to introduce myself and what we're going to do. And then I got to calm down. Okay. So we're going to take a natural breath, just in through your nose, out through your mouth. And on your next inhalation, inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale. 3, 2, 1. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale. 3, 2, 1. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale. 3, 2, 1. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. Sometimes I can feel how that was for you, and other times I can't. I didn't actually feel much change on that one. So I hope that it's helpful, regardless of if it's your first time or if it's the 10th time or the 100th time you've been doing this breath pattern. We'd have to count how many shows we've hosted. We're probably approaching 100. Okay, so let me finish out a little bit with my introduction. And actually what I should have said is I'm a psychologist and a hypnotherapist. And so that was also the reason why I introduced this breath pattern when I did. But also, if I describe myself and introduce who I am personally, and as far as my community goes, I'm originally from Southern California. I am Afro-Cuban on my paternal side, and I am Guatemalan or Maya on my mother's side. You all have met my siblings if you go back to some of the first shows that I hosted. And I'm also a mom to a 21-year-old kid. I don't even know how that happens. Let's see. The other part of me, as far as my community goes, I am a part of the Siwa Pali Collective. So we focus on Indigenous mothering, and we talk about, or we believe that we address issues from womb to tomb. And the same thing, you have met some of my comadres and some of the beautiful women and individuals that I'm in community with. All right, so quickly, announcements. I want to encourage you to become a member of the National Parents Union. Our next town hall is on February 4th. So that's an example of, if you have membership, you'll hear about these things maybe a little bit sooner than others will, just via Facebook. I don't know the topic yet of what the town hall is going to be about, but as soon as I know, I'll share with you, and there may be some information there on the website. All right, so I want to bring in our guest here in a second, Roy Tatem Jr. He is an exceptionally accomplished individual. Really, I feel like all of our guests are awesome, and he's no different. So he is a successful entrepreneur. He's a motivational speaker and a political activist. He is a former Capitol Hill staffer for Senator Chuck Robb. And after that, he founded Vanguard Strategies and Consulting, which led him to being the coordinator for the Hampton Roads for Barack Obama in 2008. He was the deputy director for the African American outreach for Bernie Sanders back in 2016. And he's held many leadership roles, one for his fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha. He's also the immediate past president of the East Valley NAACP chapter. On top of all of this, he's a leader in the community. He is completing his master's degree here. We were talking about his research in integrated social sciences here at ASU, and he is a father. So we give him that homage and honor as parenting young children, as being the parent of some children, young children. All right, I'm going to bring in Roy. How are you?
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
I can. You're good.
I got something out of the breath exercise. I almost dozed off.
Well, that just means you're going to need a nap. So.
Probably.
Wait, that's proof. That's proof that if you do that in the middle of the night, that you're going to go back to bed right after that breath pattern.
So that was a great exercise. I'm gonna incorporate that in my daily routine.
Yay!
Now I'm gonna take a nap.
That's good. No, that's awesome. Like, it's really good. It's one of those really simple things, and like you said, little techniques that we can include that we all need. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like we're just living at work these days, so it can kind of create a little break for us. So I tried.
It put me in the mind of mindfulness. It felt like it was a mindfulness exercise.
That is what it is. It is a mindfulness technique. And I think it's always important for us to talk about the traditions from which techniques come from, right? So it is mindfulness. It is based in mindfulness, and mindfulness is based in lots of traditions and histories. But we have sometimes separate or remove, some of the background behind it. But yeah, it is a mindfulness technique. So
I know a little something. You
do more than a little. So just like you have more than a few accomplishments, right? So, is there anything that I missed and that you want to highlight? Are there any other
Oh,
parts?
you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm sure anything that you may have missed, we may cover it in our conversation.
Okay.
Because that's how I talk. I feel like anything that I share, I pull from my own personal experiences. I can't be anybody else but me.
Sure.
So that's how I believe I show up, and I've been committed to showing up just in an authentic way.
Absolutely. Okay, well, perfect. So then let's do this. I like to check in, right, with my guests because I want you to feel like you're getting something out of this, although I feel like we already covered that with the breath pattern. But how are you? Like, please take your time answering that. How are you these days? How are you coping? How is your life going?
I am, I will say I am alert, and alert being that I want to make sure that things are okay. I want to make sure that my space is okay, that my community is okay, that I'm okay. I'm usually the person to check on myself last, but I just want to make sure that everything's okay, if that makes sense. Given the events already that have transpired in 2021, I think it's important to make sure that we don't have a false sense of security or a false sense of reality. Because I think it can go either way. We can either feel like, oh, you know what, we got a new president, everything's over, and everything's gonna just kind of slide back to normal, or we can be like, there were people that were just storming the Capitol 2 weeks ago, and maybe they're coming to my house. So I think people exist on one end or the other, and I'm trying my best to remain centered. That's a great way to explain it.
You're petting yourself.
If I may say so myself. Yeah.
You just said it. Okay. No, but hopefully they're not coming to your house. And so what are you concerned about? Because when you say alert, I hear like a healthy, a realistic, right, fear and concern. What are you most afraid will happen here in the coming future?
What there are a couple of things I'm most afraid of, but what I'm most afraid of is that those that decided to take extreme measures to upend or override a legitimate electoral process will not face severe consequences. So I'm most afraid of that. And I'm most afraid of it because I feel that it will embolden, if not the same group or another group, to continue in that activity. And therefore it will only get worse before we decide to make it better. So I think accountability for your actions has to happen. Many of us, obviously, in the Black community have said, there's no way that somebody that looked like me could have or led that type of aggressive position. No group, whether it was Black Lives Matter or the Black Mothers Missionary Board of the African American Baptist Church. None of us could have run up in the Capitol without facing immediate, severe, and lethal consequences.
I can't think of very many groups like that would be able to do what occurred right on at the insurrection right on Capitol Hill and not have some sort of really severe and or deadly consequence. And I can't imagine there not being a stronger or quicker response to any other group. So I'm in full agreement with you. And you and I, these are some of the, ways that we communicate or things that we communicate about of how we respond to the events that have occurred. And I was watching the news today or listening to the news because I usually don't listen, but listening to the news and I was thinking about Trump and that yes, his impeachment process has begun, but that it may get stopped and kind of hearing the delay. And I thought about that that word that you said, accountability. Like, what are we teaching our children, right? What are we teaching our children? That it is okay for a president to incite this response, right? And I don't know if it's a matter of opinion or not. That's what I think, right? That's when I hear the words that he said, and then the following actions, why I use the word incite. And I say that way because I think some people think it's a matter of opinion, you know? But yeah, so I'm deeply concerned about the fact of the example that we're giving our kids, because they know what it is to be bullied. They know what it is to have somebody commit an error, right? Do something wrong, and to not be held accountable for it.
Kids are learning. The kids are watching. I remember growing up, and I grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and a pretty racially diverse community. There were black kids, there were white kids, there were Asian kids, and we all played together. And I still remember, my grandmother saying, hey, you can't do everything that they do. And when she was saying the they, for those that may be listening and not familiar with the conversation, is the white kids, because the white kids sometimes would go above and beyond. The white kids could talk back. Some of my white friends could cuss, and it was like, there's no way I could get away with that with my mom or in front of my parents. Talking back or acting like you were going to talk back, or being or acting like you were being defiant when you were given a directive could get you in some very serious trouble, and you could face some serious consequences immediately. They talk about accountability. Yeah. We felt that immediately.
Called the backhand, or chancla if you're like a Latino family, right? It's just that immediate, like, I think the perception of choice, of like, I think I was raised a lot like not even feeling like I had a choice. Like, I knew it had to happen, and if I didn't want to get in trouble, that I had to do what was expected of me.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think kids or children nowadays are watching to see, if I do this, will I get away with it? If I do this, will I have a negative consequence or a positive consequence? So, will anybody say anything to me? And, we also know, and you're the doctor here, I'm just speculating, but I also know that some people do some of this stuff for attention, right? And I'm thinking about the dude that's from here, right? The guy with the horns on his head. That's attention. He's seeking attention. And he actually became the face of the movement. And now he's like still in federal prison right now because he wanted attention.
Well, and getting organic Trader Joe's food delivered to him. So actually, you and I talked about him I was sending you articles that my sister sent me, because she's the one who brought it up. She was like, do you know that this dude is getting organic food in wherever he's at? I don't even know where he's at. I don't know if he's in jail, prison, like what level of security he's at. But again, even more, just keep slapping us in the face, right? The double standard, right? The different level of treatment. And that's, I think, was one of the things that was so disturbing, as a part of this insurrection. I also want to talk about, like, you watched those halls, right? You were in those spaces. Did you know people who were in the building on what day was it? The 6th? Yeah, on the 6th of June.
On the 6th. I didn't know. I don't know that I knew people directly in the building. I knew people in the vicinity. And obviously, I'm friends with a few in Congress right now. Our own representative, Greg Stanton, and Ruben Gallego, Bobby Scott, who's a congressman from Virginia, a good friend. They were present as well. But also, I used to work in the United States Senate in the Russell Building, which is right across the street from the Senate chamber. And so to see one, I will say every day that I went to work on Capitol Hill, there was never a day that it was just like, oh, that's just the Capitol. No, it was like, wow. Every day it was like, wow. Mm-hmm. And so to see people really breaking the windows and breaking down the doors and just treating the nation's capital like a frat house, not even a good frat house, but like the Animal House frat house was horrible. And on top of that, to know that this was going out to the world, you know, and even still, even seeing that, and I'm gonna take it here, even seeing that, when people think of, you know, the boys in the hood or the menace to society, they still look at me.
Thank you for taking it there. Yeah, again, that double standard, right? Of that. If we think about, like, the biggest comparison was to protesters, right? And the protesters in the summer, and how we were having conversations about those who are protesting for Black Lives Matter, and the conversations around them of, like, you know, why are some people, right, blowing out windows, right, from a store? Why are some people doing this? That they're criminals and things like that. So the criminalization of protesting and activism. And I would hate for us, not you and I aren't saying this, I would hate for people to say, well, they're no different. Those who stormed, right, the Capitol are no different than those protesting in the summer for BLM. And no, they're not. They're not the same, right? Because their causes are different, and they did not commit crimes to be able to protest. But like you said, this idea of what type of activism we criminalize, right? And what we associate with deviance, right? Like you're saying, that you would be described as a menace if you were in that position.
What I also want to highlight is, and this is documented, that at the conclusion of the Civil War, there were, you know, we know about the development of the Ku Klux Klan. The development of the Ku Klux Klan came into place because there were at least 3 to 4 million newly freed slaves. Those that were enslaved, and so there were white men that felt like the newly freed slave needed to be kept in check. So they developed, and these were your businessmen, these were your lawmen, these were your teachers, some of your elected officials. They dressed up in the white sheet to conceal their identity, you know. So they whirled around and terrorized Black communities so we would remember our place. Now, the KKK died out at one point, but was resurrected through the film The Birth of a Nation, where in The Birth of a Nation, the white man that was like one of the main characters put black face on, or put the black face makeup on to go around and commit crimes, so to incite white male violence against Black people. So what I try to remind people of is that there were some people that were just looking for an excuse to incite violence against us. And, you know, one thing I've said to you, and I've said to a few people, you know, maybe in private quarters, is that we've been at war, but we don't know that we've been at war. And we don't even know how to be in war right now. We want to feel like we can work everything out. We can talk everything out. We can reason with everybody. And there are people that are just hell bent on not reasoning with us.
There's a lot. I do. There's a lot there that you said. So so I want to unpack certain things. So one thing that I thought of when you were talking is that you know, when you think about the inception of the KKK, that it was a response to progression. You know, what is viewed by progression in one group, as far as as far as, in that case, African Americans gaining rights, that the response is okay. The threats, I want to go into teaching right now, but I won't. But you know, it comes from social justice. This idea that there's a scarce amount of resources, right? And so the threat is that there's not going to be enough, and so this group can't come take of what there's not enough of, right? So we're going to respond by having to put people back in their place, because there's this idea of a hierarchy and an order, right? So having said all that, and then now we have people that feel so emboldened that they don't have to cover their faces, right? That they can feel like they can risk, right, being on television and being recorded. And I think that they thought that they weren't going to get in trouble. And granted, they have not gotten in trouble as much as as you would have, right? As people who look like me would have, right? So if my theory right now, what I just said, is that the KKK, it was a response to progression. Are we progressing? How is this? Was this a response to progression? Or is
Oh,
it?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think it was a direct response. And let me put on my political scientist hat. Because Joe Biden is now the 46th president of the United States, serving as the vice president to the first African American male president of the United States, Barack Obama. With him, he brings in the first African American, Asian American woman as a vice president. So I would say to the powers that be, to those that are against progress, they're looking at 12 years at least. I don't see Joe Biden running 2 terms. I think Joe Biden may be a 1-term president, handing it off with Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris being the front runner to the presidency in 2024. So the Republicans, see, one thing about the Republicans is they're not knee-jerk. They plan. They plan 10 years ahead, 20 years ahead, 30 years ahead. They're looking down the road. All right. If you've never heard of Pat Buchanan, evangelical, he was talking about the browning of America in like 1980. In 1990, and we're talking about when the Cubans were coming into Florida, when the Mexicans were coming into California and Arizona, or Guatemala, all of those places where there were brown people, right, coming into America. The white community has been afraid of that migration for a long time. And they've been doing all the things in their power to either curtail, penalize. One, they want to put a felony on you so they can take your right away to vote. They want to put a felony on you real quick so you can't vote, right? So that secures their voting block. Now, to Kamala Harris is probably the biggest threat to their dominance in political power. Because one, Kamala Harris is smart, she's articulate, she's young, she's going to inspire so many people, and particularly and women of color, to run for office, to be attorneys, to really enter into spaces that women have not been in our nation's history. So for white men that want power and that want to rule and want to control and really just believe in that patriarchal model, right? That's a huge threat to them. And so they didn't just want to curtail Joe Biden from being the president. They wanted to stop Kamala Harris from being the vice president, which puts her in position to be the next leader of the free world, a black woman for all intents and purposes, as the next leader. So she's our greatest hope, and she's their biggest threat. Absolutely. I don't even know who we're talking to, so I hope you feel like she's our greatest hope.
I generally speak, I think this is generally a crowd that's particularly inclusive. I would say, they're educators, parents, activists, right? This is our crowd. I don't know everyone, you know what I mean? We have, I think NPU has almost 1 million followers, right? So I don't know everyone here, but but we're not a monolith, so we lean one way, but we know that, like, even in all our communities, it's not a monolith. I heard you read my cultures. Thank you.
But I think it's important to say that one Kamala Harris, being a woman, having the first female vice president, that's historic. That's a glass ceiling shattering moment, right? That all women should celebrate, regardless of your politics. All women should celebrate that achievement. Okay.
That's girls. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so to me, to see the pictures, and I saw a ton of pictures, people posting their daughters, and I have daughters, watching Kamala Harris take her oath of office. That opens up their mind to a whole nother world now to say, if she did it, maybe I can do it too. That's all we need.
We do, and there was so much of that in the inauguration. There's so many things I want to respond to, but I'm gonna follow you here for a second. Well, I'm trying to decide. Yeah, there's things that I've been taking notes of. Like, I want to make sure we get here. So yes, I think that was the most beautiful part of the inauguration. At least beautiful to me, right? That there was so much intentional and thoughtful diversity and placement of identities throughout the entire event. And yes, absolutely. Like we were expected to see Kamala Harris, right? Because she's our VP. We didn't expect him. I didn't expect Amanda Gorman. I didn't expect to be blown away, right, by this young lady. And I remember listening to the news and hearing a commentator, right, a Black male, say that, well, obviously we're all home, so his child was, running around in the living room, and that as soon as Amanda Gorman came on, she stopped. And she stopped and she looked at the screen. And you would think about, like, our kids are always absorbing everything, right? How many hours of news and television do they watch? But the thing that made this little girl stop was Amanda Gorman. And to hear and to see her say, like, wow, like, one, she's so beautiful. She looks like me. Her hair's like me, right? That was the first thing that my daughter said. Was she wasn't watching the inauguration, but I sent her a clip. She's like, she's so pretty, and then I get to go into who she is. That is so special and important. And it's hard for me, and I think probably a lot of people, to understand how others don't want that, how others don't see value in that. And if you believe in education as being equalizing, that why you wouldn't want people, a multiplicity of people, to be educated, because they're going to take care of you later. They're paying your Social Security. Like, my kid is going to pay your Social Security. So you should want my kid to feel represented.
Absolutely. I've always said, whenever somebody takes a picture and you see that picture, and you know that you were present when the picture was taken, the first thing you're looking for in the picture is yourself. And I think in our education process, many of our kids and many of our boys have not seen themselves, as we talk about the history of our country and the great achievements, and unfortunately, many of our women have not seen themselves portrayed in a positive light. I mean, when we think about, there was a question asked after the January 6th insurrection, what radicalized these white men? And I kind of immediately thought back. Okay, I thought about that for a minute, and I just quickly typed, as soon as they get to kindergarten and they're playing cowboys and Indians.
Sure. And
go ahead. Oh. I was just going to
say, the virtual world here where we kind of step on each other. So I feel like what you're saying is that the process of socialization, the process of play, right? And the stories and the narratives that we tell one another, that like we're just living them, right? That's what a sociologist would say. Is that kind of what you're communicating?
Oh, absolutely. And I can give you another example, and I think I've stumped a lot of people with this because they don't think about it. But whenever we talk about slavery, we always talk about the act of slavery. We talk about the servants, the enslaved. One thing we never talk about, and this is an institution that lasted well over 300 years, and in some countries it's still going on. Slavery is not anything exclusive to America. However, chattel slavery is different in America than it is in the rest of the world. But what I also want people to understand is, what does it take to make a slave master? What is that education? When you're a child and your father is the slave master and he's controlling these people, as the little boy looking up to your father who is a slave master, where this life is normal. It's normal to treat. For those that watched One Night in Miami, right? In the opening scene when Jim Brown is sitting on the porch. For those that didn't see it, I'm about to give you a little piece of it. But did you see it already?
I didn't, but I'm going to. I saw you post.
You gotta watch it.
I will.
You gotta watch it. but and I'm about to just make somebody uncomfortable, maybe, but
that'll be all right.
But you know, they haven't. Jim Brown is obviously seeing a mentor, older white man, sitting on the porch. The daughter comes out to say, "Hey, you know, you promised to help me move this bureau or whatever, dresser." And you know, he says, "Okay, no problem." And then he turns to Jim Brown, "Hey, anything you need, anything I can do for you to help you, you let me know. I got you. I'm proud to say I know you. You make all of us proud. You're a credit to this community, blah, 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 blah."
Mm-hmm.
Jim Brown says, "If you got some furniture to move, let me come help you." The man stops and looks at Jim Brown. He says, "You know, we don't let niggas in the house."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he just stops him in his tracks.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is, this is normal behavior for some people, and it's passed on generation to generation. And this is why this is something that I'm also exploring in my research with the police, because many police are generational police officers. So, you know, they learn policing before they get to the academy. They learn from their father, who may have learned from their grandfather, who were able to police in different ways and treat different people different ways because the rules were different, the laws were different. So it doesn't matter how much technology we have or advanced psychological advancement we've made, or sociological advancements. They've already been taught how to be policemen before they even get to the academy, through a generation that maybe, you know, have some old time thinking.
And I think,
So,
and also,
this is what we continue to see over and over again.
we have all been taught, right? You know, there isn't anyone, right? So even individuals of color, we have been taught what the world thinks about us, right? And so that's actually part of why I think so many of us. Well, you know, I'll be really concrete in this. If y'all notice who I bring on my shows, I am exceptionally intentional about bringing people of color onto the show, because there isn't anything that can be discussed that there isn't a professional person or a loved one in my life that can't have that conversation. And it's why, because representation matters, right? Because I know I can execute this show, and it's not an exclusion of any one group, but I know I can execute this show only with Black and brown faces, right, or Indigenous faces if I had to, right? And so I don't even have to like do a lot of work to do that, right? But it's that re-socialization, right? So it's the same thing. I'll say this now, not everyone knows, but I'm a former professor at Chandler Gilbert Community College. I actually just stepped down from my position here in January. Well, we're in January, a week ago. So anyway, the point is, I used to be a diversity educator, right? And I would tell my students that the reason why I wanted them to call me Dr. LaFerine, use my title, is because there's no reason why, if they saw me pumping gas, you know, at the gas station, why they would think that I'm a doctor, right? There's like statistically, like you'll meet who I call the unicorns next week, meaning my friends, women of color that have their PhDs. We're like these mythical creatures, right? There's only 1, 2, 3% of us, depending on our demographics, right? You know, so that's what we're talking about. If we can't see ourselves in these spaces, right, then all we're going to do is take on the narrative, the negative narrative, the stereotypical narrative, right, that we have of our particular groups. And I want to bring this back too, like, and then what happens is when our groups progress, we get that backlash, right? And that's also kind of another thing that I think we're experiencing right now. And what you're saying, that alert that you started off with describing your feeling, I imagine that's what you're afraid of, that backlash, you know, that retaliation for progress.
Because it comes. It's happened at every phase in our history. You know, whether it was the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement, or the election of Barack Obama. We've seen the backlash.
So, you know, you talked about, I want to go back to a point where you talked about that, you know, compared this to a civil war, right? And I actually heard somebody, and forgive me all for not being able to reference the citation of like where I heard it, but somebody called it an uncivil war, you know, basically going to the fact that these past 4 years, we've lived in like to call it uncivility is actually like really nice. I'll be honest, from a psychological perspective, I've been calling it an emotionally abuse or psychologically abusive relationship with our president. That's what it is. And there's some responses to abuse that we should expect that I don't need to expand on right now. But the point is, like, it's we've been living an uncivil war. And so what can people do, like, from your experience in organizing, from your experiences with the various organizations that you've worked with, what can people do to kind of stay alert, but also celebrate who they are?
I think it's important to think about how we felt on Inauguration Day. You know, even I would say, once again, regardless of your politics, people were listening to one another. People were not trying to be in the gotcha moment. You know, people were celebrating a transition, okay, which has been a traditional part of our country and our nation and our civic duty. We celebrated the transition of power and leadership. Once again, regardless of your politics. And so what I want to encourage people to do is get engaged, remain engaged, because there's so much that you can learn when you're in the room. If you're at the city council meeting and you hear how things are voted on, or you see how a proposal is written or drawn up. When you go to the state capitol and you hear the debate, you know, it doesn't matter what's said on the television. You were there. You heard it yourself. Or now you can pay attention to it virtually. You know, and unfortunately, this is how people fell victim. I believe this is how people are falling victim to the conspiracy theories and to the fake news about fake news. Because these are people that are not traditionally engaged. They are probably low efficacy voters. They may not be well versed in civic engagement. So you can tell them, hey, those people over there are doing this, and here's how it's going to affect you. They're going to take, you know, what little bit you already have away. And so now you've tapped into their already insecure, low information, you know, mindsets. And you've been able, and now you can mobilize them to do what you want. And especially if they feel that the president of the United States is talking to them. Yeah. You know, I've seen a little meme of a match at the podium talking to a room full of bombs.
That's that visual. It is very powerful, you know, and it's that fear, you know, that breeding of fear. Fear is such it moves you, you know, it doesn't sustain you, but it moves you. It gets you up, it gets you going, it gets you into fight or flight. It activates your past traumas and your ideas of like not having enough, right? So yes, it totally activates us. I don't know if I cut you off.
No. I appreciate you chiming in, because I think once you get engaged, once you say, hey, you know what, it's my civic duty to at least be engaged, whether it's one issue. And I tell everybody that wants to get involved politically, pick one issue, identify one issue that you are passionate about, that you care about, that impacts you directly, that you would work on for free. Pick one issue. Don't worry about all, if you're not into the environment and all that, don't worry about all what the environmentalists are doing. If you're not into, you know, if you're not into the finance and the economics and all that, don't worry about what's happening with the economists. But if you say, you know what, education, I want my children to have the best education, and I've got children in elementary school, and I've got children in high school, and I want to make sure that they're prepared to compete when they get to college. Focus your time right there. You know, if that's your passion, focus your time right there, and you will learn so much. Education is its whole own political space in that of itself.
Yes, and like you said, and I think, you know, for folks who are politically minded or folks who are activists, right? What I think part of why I would say pick an issue that you're passionate about is because like all roads lead to Rome, right? All roads lead to whatever point of origin is important to you, Egypt, whatever it is, right? All of the systems are the same, right? It's baked in, right? And so, and actually, when you were talking about kind of the structures of white supremacy, essentially, I want to actually suggest a book for folks. So look up Joy DeGruy, or excuse me if I'm, it's DeGruy. And so her book is Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, right? So that idea of like, when we talk about systemic issues and how it's embedded in every part of our society, that book talks about it from a psychological place and a psychological level of what does it take, right? What is the impact, the consistent impact, right, of slavery in our system, or of systemic issues, or of patriarchy? You're going to see it, right, when you engage that issue that you're trying to change at a local level.
Yeah, and I think that's important because the one thing that the Trump administration was they were really against was the 1619 Project.
Yep.
And that was put out a couple of years ago now by the New York Times. And they had just released the 1776 project or whatever they wanted to call it, because they knew that the truth was being told about the origins of America. And they don't want that. As long as we feel like, you know, the Pilgrims came, they were under religious persecution, and, you know, the natives who were already here taught them how to grow corn, and they had a meal together, and they celebrated growing the first harvest, and all of a sudden, they just went away.
Yeah.
You know, and
it's dangerous groupthink, you know? It's like somebody of authority says something and we just believe them, you know, because it's hard. It is actually challenging to stand up. That's actually when you stand up, you're an activist, right? That's what what activists do. So yeah, we go along with these narratives and these lies, especially when the person who's saying it looks like us and makes us feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we've got to know. We've got to have. Once again, I think it's important for everybody to have a home library. I know we can have our own library on our phone or on our laptop, but there's nothing like being able to pick up a book, reference what you're talking about. One book that you brought up, a book I want to encourage people to check out. This is a fraternity brother of mine. He wrote "Still Invisible," based on Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. And one thing about it, one thing I want to say as well, this is the first book that I've actually written a chapter in the book as well. So I want to encourage people to check it out. You can get it on Amazon. I don't get paid for it. Elvin gets paid for it, but you know. But it is a book that centers a number of successful Black men and their journeys throughout America.
Well, and congratulations for the chapter, and also for the book and for your friends. And I think, and that's what we're talking about. Like, that's one of the, I think, points of progression that maybe people are fighting against, is that like we now have, through technology, like we have these platforms, and like we were always here, we were always educated individuals doing our job, but now more people are paying attention, right? And we have a platform, right, for it. So I want to say congratulations, but it links back to like what we're talking about of response to progression. All right, I'm going to write that down. There was something else that I wanted to.
I saw people. Are people able to ask questions? Did people ask questions or post something? What's happening in the community?
Yeah, you know, so if anyone has questions or comments, you're encouraged to make them. Nobody's put anything in here, but I'm going to give you an example actually. So the things that are going on in the community, and I mean, not that you don't know, but so the collective, the Sierra Putney Collective, right, my community nonprofit, was actually asked to support mass liberation. Mass liberation is a local organization, and what they're trying to do is individuals that were arrested during the summer protests, right, the BLM supported protests. Typically, when you're arrested at a protest, you're arrested for things like trespassing, right? You're for maybe kind of damaging property. But actually what's happening is that there are charges being added to identify and mark the protesters as a gang, which carries felony charges. And like you said, that's so important, because if you get a felony, then you can't vote. And that's what we're talking about with the system, right? And how all these things are interwoven, right? And things that's like so casual, how all of these decisions and strategies and tactics, right, are interwoven. And then we just think it's right. Like, we just think like, oh, that's a natural, normal thing to do. No, I don't think that they're calling anyone at the Capitol building, or who was a part of the insurrection, a gang, right? But that means so much. And who are we calling a gang, right? So anyway, so the collective is, trying to support mass liberation's request to council members to denounce those charges, because they're being added on, right? Just because they're not real, right? So if they're being added on, just because, you can let go of them just because too, right? Because they're not based in anything. So, actually, Maria, so we should share our the person who kind of introduced us, right? Maria Mwangi, she's asking, let me put up her comment. She's asking, what book do you recommend for our young men to read?
I have a couple of suggestions. One, I've always suggested to young men to read the autobiography of Malcolm X for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's probably one of the most transformative stories that one can read. However, I would also encourage people to read. Wow, let me think about that real quick. I would encourage people to read a book by Dr. Martin Luther King as well, to learn about some of the positions. But Dr. King is very philosophical in a lot of his writings. I've taken a couple of ethics classes and philosophy classes, and what's amazing is these professors, they always go to the traditional philosophers, traditional white male philosopher. And I'm like, well, Martin Luther King had this to say about that. And they were like, oh, really? Like, they don't think of Dr. King as being a philosopher, but he's a modern day philosopher. I would also recommend Ibram Kendi, How to Be Anti-Racist. At one point I was reading Ibram Kendi, and I was arguing with him as I'm reading him, because I'm like, because he's also holding Black people accountable too in racism. And I always understood racism. He made me challenge my definition of racism. So there are a number of stories. I would recommend Still Invisible. And here's what my point. My point is that book is like 14 or 15 short stories from Black men that talk about their journeys into. That's why that book was written. So I would say that books like that as well, because we get to tell our own stories. Barack Obama's book.
Destiny.
Why am I forgetting this?
Well, there's that.
Right. Destiny of Hope. Right.
Mm-hmm. And I would actually add, so Octavia Butler, so these are actually books, that's an author that keeps getting recommended to me, and she writes a lot on Afrofuturism, right? So I think especially like if kids can hang with the vocabulary, right? It's a lot about kind of the future, right? Very sci-fi-ish, but if you think about like 1984 and George Orwell, and how that conversation was a precursor to what was to come. A lot of people are saying that Octavia Butler's work is just like, oh wow, she wrote it a long time ago, but she was talking about what we're seeing now, And so I think kids can engage, or young teens, right? Because Maria's boys are young. Teens will be able to engage that content. But also I would say, like, go online and especially use Instagram. There are so many, and Facebook, all those things. There are so many people that put out reading lists, right? This is very Googleable for age appropriate reading lists. And people who know them can add them in the comment section as well. We are very quickly running out of time. So
time flies.
It does, especially when you're having fun. So let me ask you like a question about your restoration, or the things that help you. What are you going to do this weekend, right, to take care of yourself?
Oh, well, you know what? I've got a bike that I've been doing my best to make sure that I ride more, just to get out because I'm usually in this space working, either working, writing, replying emails, or recording. If I'm doing an interview or something, a lot, and so I'm trying my best to be less sedentary. So just doing my best to move. Um, and obviously, we've gotta be aware of COVID-19 and take those precautions. Um, and I'll say this: I'm going to be transparent. I'm 50-50 on the vaccine. I don't know that I'm in line to get the vaccine, but I think it should be given serious consideration.
Yeah.
You know, I have a friend who is a medical doctor who has already taken the vaccine. He's black and he's fine. So,
He's right. Yeah.
you know,
And his tongue didn't swell. Yes.
right. He's alive. He was one of the first people to take the vaccine, and he's alive. So, if that helps somebody, if you're in line to get the vaccine or eligible to get the vaccine, then look into it.
Yeah, I think like it's such an individual choice. I think participate. That's the biggest thing. Like in the last time you and I were on, I hosted you on a different panel. Like that was the main focus. Just participate, like engage, be able to offer your opinions about the process, and really is pay attention to who gets it, how we decide. Like same thing. We're talking about systems. You're gonna see the same process, right? Of
Right.
who has privileges and advantages in our society that we could too easily say, oh, it's just essential workers, they need it. No, there's more behind that, right? So engage that process. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that you are taking, right, COVID precautions really seriously because you got invited to this inauguration, right? But you declined the invite because you didn't feel that it was safe to travel. So
Correct. And I've been to the inauguration festivities before, and it's a lot of fun. But obviously, for a lot of reasons why this year won't be the same as previous years, and so I don't think it's worth risking my health to go and travel to the East Coast for this event.
absolutely.
Okay. It was
Okay.
good on TV. I was happy to see it on TV.
It was beautiful. No, like we got to see everything, and also I think this inauguration, it was intended to be televised, right? So it was intended to be like for a crowd, So it's like watching the Super Bowl. I mean, we all want to be there, but like you get a better view at home, right? So
you get a better view at home, right?
And it's cheaper.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Roy. I really want to just thank you for the time, and then just appreciate you for like, I always feel like I can, doesn't matter the time of day or night, I can like ask you a question really, what do you think about this? And then it started this conversation, this friendship, where we pick one another's brains and get opinions from one another. So I appreciate that. Go ahead.
I want you to watch One Night in Miami.
I will. I know, and I knew you were going to bring it up, and it's been on my Prime Video thing, and I'm like, he's going to bring it up, and you and other people that I respect and trust have been talking about it. I'm like, I know, I got to watch it, so I'll watch it this weekend. I will actually commit to that, to watch it this weekend, and we'll talk about it. And good luck with your studies, good luck with your parenting, good luck with all the things that you're involved in, all of the work that you do that's so important and supports so many other people. So,
well, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, everyone. So have a beautiful, wonderful weekend. Get some rest. Take care of yourself. Do something like go ride your bike or whatever it is that you can do with all the precautions that are necessary, so that we can come back and do all of this important work next week. All right, everyone. Take care, and we will see you next Friday.